So it's your main man BTM, and we are back with the live stream for the Bitcoin conference day 2, and just had to take a break, start the video or start the stream back over. So thanks for joining. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let's get back to it. So let me see. Let's start that screen share. And let's see where we're at.
To a world superpower. Everyone is exploring how Bitcoin fits in and provides that element of self-sovereignty. And I think we're seeing, a stack started to emerge, right? Where digital money is a piece of this self-sovereign stack. And there's a version of it that works for companies, a version of it that works for countries, and a version of it that works for individuals. And I like, for example, at countries like the United Arab Emirates, right? And those countries have a lot of capital and autocratic leaders that are trying to build, essentially a self-sovereign stack with their own energy resources, their own compute, AI inference, and their own, hard asset holdings to kind of build a self-sovereign, system for themselves. And I think that should be a stack that's available to every individual and every company in the world. And so I think it's encouraging to see this kind of development play out with corporate treasuries on Bitcoin. And I see these trend lines start to converge.
Well, Zach, we've seen this before. Certainly, we saw Dell, a former shareholder proposal to get it to consider Bitcoin on the balance sheet, did not pass. Microsoft, McDonald's. Is Meta different?
It could be. I mean, stepping back, I think it's hard to really overstate how early we are in this story. I think the world has only fairly recently discovered, I mean, some of us maybe a little bit longer ago, but the mainstream has discovered that Bitcoin is a legitimate, real, important store of value, I'd say sometime in the beginning of 2024 with the launch of the spot Bitcoin ETFs. And we're in this really interesting period where these actors, everyone from, sovereign governments to state governments to corporations to funds to companies are trying to figure out, okay, how do we leverage this asset, right? This unique digital commodity that sort of sprang from the ether out of this bizarre virgin birth with a pseudonymous founder, and what does optimizing Bitcoin as a store of value look like? And so I think we're seeing in the private sector this sort of Cambrian explosion of different experiments of how to use Bitcoin as a treasury asset. And is it just, holding as much Bitcoin as you can? Is it doing the sort of MicroStrategy playbook of convertible note offerings and at the market equity offerings in order to arbitrage the way the capital markets will give you access to capital? Is it figuring out what your long-term liabilities are and figure out how Bitcoin as an asset can match certain of those liabilities? And what I think at the end of the day is that companies will find some answer to that question, right? For most big companies, they will have one of those, potentially those three needs that Bitcoin will fit well for. And I think Meta as a really sort of forward-thinking company, right? They changed their name to Meta. They want to be the home of the metaverse. This could be the home of the sort of Ready Player One utopia, dystopia, depending on how you see that. I think it is likely that sooner or later they find some integration for Bitcoin.
Well, we've seen GameStop come out and buy 4,700 Bitcoin. Meta, could they be next? You'll be seeing it live at the Bitcoin conference. Stay tuned. We're getting back to the main stage with more programming. We'll be right back.
Shopkeeper in Nairobi saving her paycheck in USDC. In effect, indirectly buying US debt. That's one of the most important things here. So the world is absorbing US debt with stablecoins. And when you look at what the stablecoin issuers and you stack them in comparison to other countries, you take all of them, Tether, Circle, stack them in comparison to other countries. Stablecoin issuers rank roughly 19 in terms of purchasing US debt. That means they're buying more debt than Germany and South Korea. Now, as I remind you, I said 1.25 trillion projected in 2030. So when that happens, that means that stablecoin issuers will be the biggest buyers of US debt. But again, today, people need dollars. Tomorrow, people need Bitcoin. And I know you all know why. I personally, when I look at what the Trump administration is doing, I'm very happy. They've embraced our industry. Vice President Vance's speech was amazing today. So because they've embraced our industry, I love it. With Doge, the efforts with Doge, it's great. But some of you know about the big, beautiful bill, and I understand it's not finished yet. But in the House at the 11th hour, pork was added, extra spending was added. So you have to question, does some of the bureaucrats in Washington have the fiscal discipline for this country? We know with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. So this is what I call the Trojan horse strategy. We lead with what the people need today so that we can deliver what they will need tomorrow. And we know that's Bitcoin. So you want the next billion Bitcoiners? They're right here. And we see it. We see it all across the world with our customers. In fact, 70% of our customers are outside of the United States. Because for them, the wallet is no longer an app. The wallet is a bank branch. It's a passport. It's a freedom machine. The next billion people will not be signing up for a bank. The next billion people will be downloading a wallet. But what needs to happen is that wallets need to have to abstract all of the complexity and technology away. That means no complicated 12-word secret phrases, no crypto addresses, no L1, L2, who cares? It should be, I want to send $20 to my mom. I want to be able to buy groceries for my family. I want to save in dollars and be ready to swap for sovereignty when I'm ready. That's ultimately what this is about. Because we're not building for crypto natives anymore. We're building for the global mainstream. And they won't be signing up for banks. So because we have millions of customers all over the world, we have the fortune to be able to speak with them, have conversations with them. I want to share a story of one of our customers. So a father wrote into us, his father in Venezuela, and his son's name is Andres. And you know the political instability in Venezuela. You know the currency issues that they have. And so his son, Andres, built a crypto mining rig. He started mining crypto. And then he swapped it for dollars. Because that was his lifeline for his family. These stories are happening all over the world in millions. Again, we're fortunate to be able to have these conversations and learn what these people need. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I know for us, oftentimes, we can get really caught up in the yield. Oh, this token gets 30%, 40%. If you stake in this pool and mine in this pool, whatever. I have gotten caught up in it as well. But at the end of the day, the yield doesn't matter. It's the sovereignty that matters. And that's why we're here. That's why this is so important. So imagine a world with 8 billion wallets, and every wallet downloaded is actually a Bitcoin wallet. Every dollar saved is one swap away from sovereignty. And that's the world where that gives us one inevitable outcome. And that inevitable outcome is freedom. So the playbook is this. Start with something that people need every single day. Make it so incredibly simple. Dollars, stablecoin. Then we slide in Bitcoin behind the scenes. So it's ready for when they need it. And then in doing that, we will empower the world. Because the reason this is so important, because freedom is not something that we keep to ourselves. Freedom is a protocol that we share all across humanity. And that's why this is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, JP. Our first keynote of Bitcoin 2025 here in Vegas. We have lots of incredible keynotes, panels.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine News Desk presented by Mara. It's day one at the largest Bitcoin conference in the world, and history is happening. A Guinness Book of World Record in progress. Here to talk about it, we've got a new panel. Brandon Green, head of the Bitcoin Conference. Frank Corva, senior White House correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine and Rockstar B2C Inc. advisor. So the Guinness Book of World Records, they are here. They are watching, and I think we've got a counter of the number of transactions happening on site at this conference. There's an attempt to break the world record. Before we get into it, a slew of announcements about Bitcoin payments. We've seen Square come out, add it to 5 million merchant terminals. Steak and Shake taking Bitcoin for payments, talking about how it's faster, cheaper, better. Rockstar, why don't we start with you? Set the stage. What is happening here, and why did you want to set this Guinness Book of World Record?
Because I always been saying if it's a Bitcoin event, Bitcoin conference, it has to accept Bitcoin payments. As we saw, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but luckily now I'm here, so I'm gonna give it a try. And if we're, like 0 out of 2, yeah, it will
becoming easier though. Brandon, head of the Bitcoin conference, why try to set the stakes? Why set a record? What does the record mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you've seen Bitcoin really start to adopt and flourish in the store of value narrative. You've seen now corporate balance sheets adding Bitcoin to their treasury, and I think the next phase of Bitcoin is really using it as a medium of exchange. And so we want to really kick-start that narrative here at the conference, point out how effective it is as a medium of exchange. Even if you get one-off terminal issues, those will be fixed, and every day it becomes easier and easier to spend your Bitcoin, to use your Bitcoin on site, and we want this to be the #1 place in the world that Bitcoin is used.
Well, we hear from folks in the industry, people like Michael Saylor, never sell your Bitcoin. Isn't spending selling? Frank, how do you think about sending a Bitcoin payment? What do you hear on the floor?
I don't think it's selling. I guess some people could conceptualize it that way. Bitcoin is meant to be spent. If we look at the title of the white paper, Bitcoin is peer-to-peer electronic cash. We had a gentleman on the desk the other day, Herman Vivier, founder of Bitcoinized, a Bitcoin circular economy where people spend sats every day without thinking twice about it because it's a better money than the South African rand in that case. We see that same story playing out around the world, different parts of Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, but here in the States as well. We had Steak and Shake on stage yesterday talking about accepting Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. We're moving in that direction, and it's cool to see it happen. And this gentleman right here, for all those who don't know, this Guinness World Record that we're trying to set, this is the mastermind behind all this. He's making it all happen here today. Uncle Rockstar, great to have you with us.
Well, let me go back to Brandon for a second. Let's talk numbers. So is there an existing record? What is the new record that you want to set? How high is the bar? How many payments could we see today at the Bitcoin conference?
Yeah, I would like for us to test the feasible limits of what the network can actually even accomplish today. So if we could get to 1 million, that'd be amazing. But I think Rockstar might have a heart attack if we get that high. Rockstar, how many do you want to see?
I mean, we did the research, and based on the previous event that were done, like the Guinness Book of World Records has set this threshold of 4,000 transactions, and we're currently in 688.
Wow.
And again, it was a bunch of events that were looked at. Shout out to Bitcoin Atlantis, Baltic Honey Badger in Riga, Bitcoin Jungle had the event. So all of that was taken into account because, yeah, if we go and we generate 1 million Lightning invoices in 30 minutes, yeah, technical people know how hard that is. But we are at 690. We're going for 4,000. And yeah.
Well, we'll be tracking it throughout the day, of course. Many merchants here buying and selling goods for Bitcoin. Brandon, Frank, maybe before we go back to the main stage, what are some interesting things you're seeing out there being sold?
What am I seeing being sold? First of all, there's amazing merch all throughout this conference. You got pens, you've got swag, you've got even some wallets, you've got all sorts of Bitcoin gear. Ways that you can hold your Bitcoin, ways that you can spend your Bitcoin all over the place. And the other thing that I'm seeing as we look around, we had the mayor of New York walking by. We had Russell Okung, the former left tackle in the NFL, taking pictures over here. It is a crazy madhouse all around us. And I think that, this world records, setting opportunity really just emphasizes how this is the center of Bitcoin today. And it is a very fun place to be. And everyone watching at home, we'll see you next year, but you're missing out on a good one here.
Everything from trading cards to apparel and art being swapped and sold at the Bitcoin conference. We'll be tracking the Guinness Book of World Records all day. We're going to send it over to the main stage. We've got Miles Suter from Block again, accompanying at the vanguard of Bitcoin payments. Stay tuned on X, Rumble, and YouTube.
Incredible speakers. And I just got the thumbs up, which means it is time for one of those speakers to come to stage. Are you guys ready to go? Yes, okay, let's keep it up. This is a big announcement. This is Miles Suter from Block. Let's get a round of applause for Miles, everyone. Woo!
I'm not going to go out if it's not, man. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Woo!
Bitcoin is at a crossroads. On one hand, it's never been stronger. Trillions in market cap, millions of holders, and even talks of nation state adoption. Technical difficulty with the slides in the background, it looks like. But we're gonna freestyle it. The original vision, the one in the title of the white paper, peer-to-peer electronic cash, is still mostly a dream. We use Bitcoin to hold, to hedge, to opt out, but we rarely use it to live. At Block Inc., we believe that has to change. Because if Bitcoin doesn't get used, if it doesn't become everyday money, it risks failing to live up to the mighty mission that has inspired so many of us around the globe. That's why at Bitcoin 2025, Block is officially announcing that we're bringing Bitcoin payments capabilities to our millions of Square businesses and point of sales. At Block, we've always believed in Bitcoin's promise, but belief alone is not enough. What matters is action. And that's why, for more than a decade, we've kept showing up. Often before it was popular, and sometimes before it even seemed practical. In 2023, we first enabled Bitcoin on-chain payments at Square. We were early, and it didn't get much traction. And the Lightning white paper was still years away, but it planted a seed. In 2018, Cash App became the first public company to support Bitcoin, driving the first exposure to Bitcoin for millions of Americans. In 2019, we launched Spiral to support open source Bitcoin development, no strings attached. In 2020, we co-founded the Crypto Open Patent Alliance to defend Bitcoin innovation and fight back against patent trolls. We'll come back to this one. In 2020, we also put Bitcoin on our balance sheet mere weeks after MicroStrategy. In 2021, we launched the Bitcoin Clean Energy Initiative to directly counter the boiling the ocean narrative. In 2022, we began building Proto, our open source mining initiative. And again, in 2022, Cash App became the first public company and the first major financial platform to adopt the Lightning Network. In 2023, the first physical BitKeys, our dead simple self-custody wallet for the world, came off the production line. And in 2024, we helped defeat Craig Wright in court, standing up for Satoshi's legacy and for developers around the world. And last year, we also introduced Bitcoin conversions, which allowed some Square businesses to convert part of their incoming sales to Bitcoin using Cash App. These aren't just headlines. They're a pattern. Again and again, Block has made early, principled bets on Bitcoin. We've made it more accessible. We've fought to make it more secure. And now we're focused on the third and hardest part, making it usable every day. So why are Bitcoin payments important? At Block, we believe the world needs a native currency of the internet, one that isn't dependent on gatekeepers, doesn't stop at artificial borders, and doesn't fall apart under political pressure. That currency is Bitcoin. And payments, real everyday payments, are how we make that vision come to life. If we don't use Bitcoin for payments, then we risk losing one of the most important promises, permissionless money. If we don't preserve the qualities of cash in a digital world, then human liberty is in serious trouble. And unfortunately, probably forever. Again, Jack said it best, if Bitcoin just becomes digital gold, we failed the mission. Bitcoin payments validate Bitcoin, not because the government says so, but because the market does. When price discovery goes from a handful of major exchanges to millions upon millions of participants in an economy, Bitcoin's decentralization increases. Payments are core to the soul of Bitcoin's ethos. When someone tips their barber in Bitcoin, or streams payments to their favorite podcaster, or zaps a note on Nostr, proving that Bitcoin is money. And the more that Bitcoin is used as money, the more robust and cemented into our world it becomes. And we all need to do our part. At Block, we believe Lightning is key to making Bitcoin more practical and accessible for everyday use and for everyday people. But we also believe that Lightning can be an essential foundation for the coming age of artificial intelligence. Humans and machines alike will require global, instant, and programmatic payments to unleash our fullest potential. And they will prefer a currency like Bitcoin. Agents are going to need frictionless, permissionless payments. They're going to need to transact instantly, to stream microtransactions, to bid on bandwidth, data sets, or whatever new economic models become viable in this new age that we're entering. At present, Block runs one of the top Lightning nodes globally, and we brought the ability to use Lightning payments to our 50+ monthly active users within Cash App. And here's what's wild. It's working. Cash App continues to be one of the largest Bitcoin on-ramps in the US, regularly accounting for almost 10% of on-chain block space on any given day, month, or year. And at the same time, in 2024, we saw a 7x increase in Lightning payment volume compared to the previous year. And this usage continues to shift today. 1 in 4 of our outbound Bitcoin payments are now happening on Lightning. And at the infrastructure layer, we're earning nearly 10% Bitcoin on Bitcoin returns by efficiently routing real payments across the Lightning network. This isn't yield from altcoin staking or reckless speculation. It's from solving hard real-time routing problems. And it's real Bitcoin on Bitcoin returns from our corporate holdings via supporting real payments use cases. What we see is that when they're enabling real payments by making them faster, more convenient, the network gets stronger, smarter, and more useful. So if you're wondering if Bitcoin is still just an asset, the answer is no. It's already a network, it's already a protocol, and now Block is leading the effort to make it into the world's best payment system. So today we're taking the next step. For the first time ever, businesses will be able to accept Bitcoin natively directly through the Square point of sale, just like they would with cash, credit cards, and tap to pay. No clunky workarounds, just one seamless, elegant flow for both the customer and the business. Right now, if you head over to the conference merch store, just beyond these walls, every Square register is running a version of the updated point of sale. And if you pay with Bitcoin, you'll receive a 21% discount. There you'll get to see it and experience it first before we start rolling it out, Lightning payments to Square Business later this year. Why does this matter? Because this is what makes Bitcoin everyday currency for everyone. What we're showing at the conference is just one layer of what we'll be introducing. We're actually building a full Bitcoin for businesses stack. We envision a world where any and all Square businesses will accept Bitcoin payments that seamlessly blend to the background. Whether they want to hold it as Bitcoin, convert it into local currency, whether they want to keep their Bitcoin in the Square ecosystem, or whether they want it to automatically be swept out to self-custody. This means not just accepting Bitcoin, but holding it, managing it, converting it, and reporting on it. We believe hardworking entrepreneurs deserve access to the full power of Bitcoin. They deserve the ability to bank in Bitcoin, to integrate Bitcoin into the tools they already use, from sales to accounting to taxes, to take the earnings from their life's work and transfer them into the hardest money ever created. It's about taking the blood, sweat, and grit into small businesses and turning that into something generational, something that honors the work, that protects it, and that gives it a future. For 16 years, that's what Square has enabled for millions of businesses of work. 1 year ago, we enabled some Square businesses to start dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, converting a set % of their daily sales automatically. Today, 1,700 businesses are all 100% in the money. Some have one employee, some are very large, some are converting %, some are going as high as 60%. But with this feature, we've seen firsthand that businesses DCAing into Bitcoin can unlock more control over their treasury, a hedge against inflation, a path for faster business expansion, and importantly, a signal to their customers about what they stand for. And we weren't going to let our businesses do this alone. As a company, we are DCAing ourselves, taking 10% of all of our profits from Bitcoin and adding it to our corporate balance sheet as a salute to our beloved Square businesses and a nod to our overall conviction. We're in the process of expanding this to all businesses, and the experience will be native within Square Banking. You'll be able to set conversion percentages dynamically, toggle it on or off based on cash flows, and take your Bitcoin into self-custody at any time. It's the simplest way for small businesses to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. We'll also have native buy sell functionality, making Square Banking the place where businesses can manage their active Bitcoin treasury. This will continue to differentiate Square Banking as a one-stop shop for businesses that want to do business in the way that they prefer, in Bitcoin or in USD or both. This will be the first mainstream accessible tool for businesses to earn, manage, and grow their wealth from their life's work and to participate natively in the Bitcoin economy. And later this year, we'll begin rolling out what you're seeing here today. Beautiful Square terminals accepting Bitcoin payments at your favorite and frankly, typically the coolest neighborhood businesses. Ultimately, our goal is for when you think of Bitcoin for business, you think of Square. We're in the early stages of kicking off this journey, and I hope you kick it off with us for the sake of your business and for the sake of Bitcoin in the long run. So why do we think that things will be more successful than in 2013? Back then, Cash App was just starting out, playing around with email-to-email fiat payments. Many of our largest Bitcoin peers did not exist yet. And there's been so much work done by so many people to get us collectively to where we are today. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that our competitors in the industry are also our collaborators. As they grow, the network grows, and we all benefit. We're building a new future together, one that we all believe is rooted in a more free and fair foundation. And the rising tide lifts all boats. In 2025, with so many Lightning native Bitcoin apps, we've collectively grown the top of funnel of Bitcoiners who are not only willing, but importantly, now able to spend their Bitcoin to a number of many, many millions, tens of millions. It's strength in numbers. So hand in hand, let's do this one more time. Let's keep manifesting we know we need to live in. We can make Bitcoin the global reserve currency of our world by using it in our everyday lives. So if you see a Square business, we encourage you to do your part and pay in Bitcoin to show that the Bitcoin economy is not only possible, but inevitable. The long road to mainstream starts now. The new chapter of making Bitcoin everyday money will begin with skepticism and require us together as a community to be pioneers, just like we all did with Bitcoin, just like we did with Lightning. Bitcoin as everyday money won't just happen on its own either, but we're all used to that. It starts with us, the early adopters, the community of tens of millions of passionate Bitcoiners around the world, including small business owners who use Square. And based on experience, I'm certain others will follow along shortly after. But with any cold start problem, someone has to be first. Someone bold who wills into existence their vision of the future. And there's no company in the world in a better position to kick this off than Block Inc. Alongside all of you, the amazing Bitcoin community. So we hope you will join us because Bitcoin offers a new path, one that starts gradually and then suddenly. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine News Desk presented by Mara. It's day one at Bitcoin 2025, and it is an absolutely packed house here at the Venetian in Las Vegas. You've heard BitBonds announce Bitcoin on balance sheets, and just now, Bitcoin payments coming to millions of merchants around the US. You heard from Miles Sutter of Block talking about peer-to-peer cash. The dream of Bitcoin is, quote, if Bitcoin doesn't become everyday money, it will fail to live up to its mission. Now to talk about what's happening at the conference in terms of bootstrapping the Bitcoin economy, we have Frank Corva, senior White House correspondent, and Rockstar Dev, B2C Inc. advisor. There is a Guinness Book of World Record attempt in progress. That's right. If we reach a certain threshold, the Bitcoin conference will be in the Guinness Book of World Records. Rockstar, I want to talk to you about the technology behind this. This is cutting edge stuff being done by the conference. There's a lot of Bitcoin conferences around the world. A lot of them don't do as much as the Bitcoin conference to leverage technology. What is unique here that you're seeing on the floor?
Yes, and I just want to say it's BTCing, but it's all of you participating and all our exhibitors. Everyone is getting the pin. And there is tons of technology, man. I worked on BTC Pay server. I worked on Strike over the years. And now Square is joining. And they felt bad that this morning the demo didn't work. So we're going to do it live.
We're going to do a live payment demonstration. You're seeing now the floor shoppers. Rockstar, what's going on over here? Can we get a zoom in on
Rockstar,
this?
Yes.
We have a $1 bill here. I'm about to tap my Bolt card here with Uncle Rockstar's face on it, if you will.
Yes, so that's why it didn't work. It was Trump card and not Rockstar.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
well, the payment has gone through, my friend.
So-
All right, a Bitcoin payment made on stage right now. One of many happening on the floor as we build to the Guinness Book of World Records. We're going to Lynn Ulbricht live on the floor. Of course, her son taking the stage in the final keynote on Thursday. Isabella Santos, our roving reporter, over to you.
No, man, I'm telling you,
Well
that's
done.
it. That's
Well done, sir.
You finally made it.
Headsets on. Keep going. We're coming right back.
okay.
You didn't zoom in on the payment though.
If you want me
has
to, we
been
got it.
fighting and advocating to free Ross Ulbricht for over a decade, and you never once gave up. How does freedom taste like?
Delicious.
Can you please?
It's really wonderful. Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes hard for me to even believe now. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Ross isn't in prison, you know, and I can relax about some things. No, it's incredible. It's incredible for our family. And yeah.
Can we relive those first 5 days when Trump was elected and you were waiting for them to sign the free Ross Day 1? How did that feel? What was going through your head?
Well, we were hoping for a commutation, a full commutation time served. The judge had put something on there, which was that he would have a lifetime of supervised release, which is very unusual. That meant for the rest of his life, he would have a parole officer he'd have to report to who could put him back in prison at any time, and all kinds of restrictions. It's pretty rough. Usually you have it for a while, but not a lifetime. So we were just hoping for that. And we never, well, I never thought we'd have a pardon. I mean, I just never thought we'd have a full pardon. And the day that, Trump had said he would do it. And I believed that he would do it and that he would keep his word. And I did actually get to talk to him and he told me he would do it. But he said that I might not have time to do it day one. I've got a lot to do that day, but I'll do it the next day. And I was like, that's just fine. No problem. And no, it was great. And the next day after Inauguration Day, we were like, okay, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And that evening, I had gone in the other room for something, missed a call. The call was from Trump. I missed a call. I'm like, no. But there was a message that I was able to say, hello, you missed this call. And his office said, would you like to speak to him? And I'm like, yes, I want to speak to him. And he got on and he said, I have good news for you. And I'm like, oh my God, and he said, I'm going to give your son a full and unconditional pardon. I was like, oh my God, incredible. It was just, I was losing it at that point. And he took the time to read the whole pardon to me. And then at the end, he said, and tell him to stay clean. And so it was amazing. It was amazing. And then we went his wife, Caroline, and I, and his sister, my daughter, went to the prison, and his dad joined us right away. And he was rode with his wife. They had her pick him up, and he just drove out, and there he was outside the building. And we hugged and kissed, and we were so excited. And then had a whole family reunion for that week. It was amazing. It was amazing.
And I feel like it's still amazing.
It's still amazing.
Because Ross is free. And as you can see, this is the live auction, Ross Ulbricht's auction, worth everything that he wore in that full decade that the world took from him. Over to you guys at the news desk. Yes. Oh.
A sobering moment at a time of celebration. You just heard from Lynn Ulbricht talking about the pardon of her son, Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht, launching this week Mothers Against Cruel Sentencing, a new nonprofit that hopes to continue her work fighting for others in the judicial system who need freedom. We're going to turn it now to talking about the latest edition of Bitcoin Magazine on newsstands now. You can go to bitcoinmagazine.com, pick up the latest copy. Of course, Ross Ulbricht now on the cover. This magazine includes a lot of interesting content about Ross, his time in prison, and of course, his release. There's a special letter from Ross in this edition, as from his mother, Lynn, who, of course, whose work has really inspired the Bitcoin movement and was instrumental in seeing Ross eventually released. Frank, I want to go over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the making of this magazine and the love and care that really went into producing this product?
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing, especially to be able to showcase this here in front of not only the 30,000 people here, but to the world, to the many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are tuning in. Lynn Ulbricht's fight over the last 11 years has been harrowing. David's been close to her. Many people from the BTC Inc. community and staff have been close to her. Many people from the Bitcoin community in general. And the fact that this is how it ended, it almost brings tears to my eyes as I talk about it. And to put a little interesting spin on it, my mom is actually here. She was the first person that ever encouraged me to write about Bitcoin and has been a tremendous support in my life. You know, she read the story last night and it almost brought her to tears as well. I mean, there's really nothing more powerful almost than a mother's love for their children, their son, and for her to remain faithful all this time, and then to have the president of the United States call you directly. And I believe, I'm going to get some of the technical details wrong here, so please correct me, Pete, but we were hoping for, I think it was a pardon, but it ended up being more than we were hoping for, which was something that would essentially expunge.
Well, they were looking to commute the sentence,
essentially,
which would have, he would have still been guilty of the original crime, but of course, Trump coming through with an additional pardon on day one. Rockstar, I want to go over to you briefly. A double life sentence plus 40 years. This was the sentence handed down to one of the early innovators of Bitcoin payments. We're talking about the Guinness Book of World Record, all that's done to bootstrap the Bitcoin economy. Can you talk about what it means for Ross to take the stage tomorrow?
Ross is absolute pioneer, and coding free market is not a crime. It's preposterous what was done to him, and we're so glad you're free, Ross. Let's go.
Over to the main stage, where we got Arthur Hayes, another recipient of a presidential pardon. Stay tuned on X, YouTube, and Rumble.
He was with George Soros, helped defeat a few different currency pegs, and is obviously extremely knowledgeable about what has to happen economically for the U.S. to succeed, given all the issues that they have. And here's a photo of Basit giving a sales presentation. I'm sure some of you have seen this movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, and the iconic scene when, I forgot the name of the actor, standing up there and telling the salespeople, ABC, always be closing. So what's Scott Bassit's job? So every time you see him on TV, imagine he's a used car salesman and he's selling you something. What is he selling you? Bonds. His job is to sell bonds. His job is to sell bonds because his boss, the US government, needs to finance itself. So why are bonds shitty investments? Well, here in yellow, this is a chart of the total amount of US Treasury debt, and I started it in 2017. And what you can see here is it's indexed at 100, and the supply of debt has gone up by about 80%. And then I index this against the TLT, which is the ETF of long-term bond treasuries, divided by the NASDAQ 100. And so if the chart's going down, that means the NASDAQ is outperforming bonds. And so the outperformance of the NASDAQ is about 80% from 2017 until the present. So yes, you might have made money, owning bonds on your coupon, but if you put your money in the stock market, you would have made 80% more. Okay, let's look at the same chart versus gold. Similar story. If you had not owned a US Treasury bond and bought gold instead, you would have outperformed by about 80%. Now, obviously, this is not a gold or stock conference. We're here to talk about fucking Bitcoin. So what is this performance versus Bitcoin? And it's even more dramatic. It's about like 99%. You have outperformed by buying Bitcoin versus buying bonds. And so while there are many investment professionals who stand up and they'll tell you, hey, I think the bond market is going to do well over the next year or 2 years, what have you. That might be true. You might actually make money owning bonds, but you'll make more money owning other things. And the goal of investing is to maximize the amount of money you make given the current circumstances, and owning government bonds is not a great trade. Now, obviously, this feeds back into my message of this job that Basit has is very difficult, because as more investors read these charts and understand that they're significantly underperforming what they could be making for themselves and their clients by staying in government bonds, then there needs to be more government action in order to make sure that the US government is able to fund itself. So obviously, the new administration, the Trump administration came in and they talked about how the US government has a spending problem. Now, here's a chart from the Peterson Institute, and this is up until March of this year. The fiscal year in the United States starts in October. And what we can see here is that even though there's been a lot of effort and rhetoric about the fact that the US government is spending too much money, in fiscal year 2025, we're already tracking above fiscal year 2024, which is already a record year for the deficit. Now, obviously, in the media, we've been talking a lot about how, certain people, and we'll get to that person in a second, are going to rein in government spending by eliminating fraud and abuse. And so we talked about it for a while, and then the protagonists of this effort, the Doge, went missing, and we haven't heard from them in a while because it's bad politics. Every dollar that the government spends is going into somebody else's pocket. And if you're going to come out here and say we're going to cut trillions of dollars from the deficit, that's obviously going to impact a lot of people and businesses in an adverse fashion. And we saw sort of the negative reaction to this from the media, from individuals. And ultimately, I think the politicians realized, hey, this isn't great politics. Let's call in our attack dog, let him go off into the sunset and run his private company. But what that means is if they're not going to be able to cut the deficit meaningfully, how do you make the books balance? And recently, Scott Bessent has gone on a media tour and talked about how he's focused on growth. He's all in on growth. And so what does that mean if you're running a massive deficit? That means that you need to get nominal GDP above your cost of interest, which is very difficult to do unless you're going to up the amount of credit in the economy. So a lot of you in this room are American or spend a lot of time in North America. I have lived most of my adult life in Greater China. And when you live in China, you understand that GDP or growth is just an output of how much credit you want to put into the economy. And so we want to understand what the Trump administration, and I think any administration would do, given these mathematical facts. We have to understand that this economy depends on credit. And so if you're willing to put more credit into the system, then you'll get any growth target that you want. So if Basit says they want 6 or 7% nominal GDP growth, great. How much credit are you going to create? And we want to know how much credit they're going to create, because ultimately that is what leads to Bitcoin outperforming every other asset in fiat terms. So how do we outgrow a 7% persistent deficit? What can they do? Usually the authorities blow another financial bubble. Maybe that's Bitcoin and crypto. A very accommodative stance from the politicians to say, hey, we want the crypto bros and girls to get very wealthy, pay capital gains taxes, spend a lot of money and increase economic performance. They could encourage lending by the banking system to real world economy. That I call this QE for poor people in an essay that I wrote a few months back. And essentially, if the banking system, instead of doing financial engineering, takes its balance sheet and lends to ordinary companies, this produces jobs and economic growth. Now, the problem with both of these things is that there is inflation. Inflation is necessary to delever the balance sheet. And I know it's a dirty word in politics and economics, but inflation is necessary for the government to afford this massive debt pile that it has. So we are going to get inflation. And obviously, people in this room understand that Bitcoin is the best hedge against that, but we need to spread this message around the world. Now, recently, I want to talk about a few things. The path to $1 million Bitcoin. And I believe there's three main prongs to this. So the first thing is capital controls versus tariffs. I wrote a recent essay where I delved into the fact that I think tariffs are bad politics because they encourage goods inflation and empty shelves, and the ordinary Americans don't like that. But you can achieve the same goal of economic rebalancing by using capital controls instead. And so we started to see certain, fringe economists, and it will be mainstream soon, talking about how they can rescind certain tax benefits that foreigners have investing into America and take this income and redistribute it either to voters or to buying certain maturity of treasury bonds. The second thing is an exemption of the bank supplemental leverage ratio, which I'll get into in a second. Scott Bessent has talked about this on multiple interviews, and he's even turned up the rhetoric recently in recent Bloomberg and Fox News interviews, talking about how this ratio, he believes this summer, there'll be an exemption, just like there was in COVID, for large banks to buy treasuries with infinite leverage. And finally, something that's becoming a lot more energy is the Fannie and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored entities that will be able to juice the mortgage market with lots of money if they're allowed to once again. So let's go into these three horsemen. Foreigners must pay is good politics, right? If you're going to go out to the voters and say, I'm going to give you something, obviously it'd be great if somebody else was paying for it. That's just how politics works around the world. So back in 1984, because the US government had another problem, same problem, how do we get people to buy our debt? And this is at a time when the 30-year treasury is trading at about 12% yield. They said, hey, why don't we exempt foreign owners of bonds from withholding taxes? Now, if you're an American, all the interest that you receive from owning a treasury bond is taxed at a particular rate. I think it's between 20 and 30%. And right now, if you're a foreigner, you don't have to pay that. So there is talk now about rescinding that exemption to do a few things. First, it could raise over $1 trillion over a decade by basically taxing foreigners on the income that they receive. Now, obviously, if you receive a tax, you're probably not going to want to own a treasury bond. So one thought is, how about we make it that it's very low tax to own a long-term treasury bond? These are the things that Bessent has a trouble selling, and very high tax on treasury bills. These are the cash-like instruments that you might own in your money market account. And everybody wants this. Everybody wants a high-yielding cash account. So let's penalize you for owning that, but let you own this long end. And that's a soft form of yield curve control. How do we get demand into the long end from foreigners? Well, just change the tax rates. Now, the ultimate problem of this is who's going to replace foreigners as a marginal owner of debt. Now, obviously, that means they're going to print the money to make up for the amount of money that's lost from foreigners not investing in this debt. Other thing, bank buying bonanza. So the supplemental leverage ratio, if you don't remember anything from this presentation, do please remember this. It's a way for banks to buy bonds with infinite leverage. So there's something called Basel III. It's this very complicated regulation that was put in after the global financial crisis. And it did something sensible. It said, hey, banks, you didn't have a lot of capital. Why don't we make you have more capital? So if I own a bond, I have to put up some of my own equity capital against that. That makes a lot of sense. Well, that means that the US banks will run up into a limit as to how much US Treasury debt they can buy. Remember, Bessent has $2 trillion, if not more, per year of bonds that he needs to sell, and he needs to make sure that somebody can buy these. So if I remove this exemption, it allows commercial banks to buy Treasury bonds with infinite leverage. And when they can do that, their profits soar because they pay very low rates on commercial deposits. And obviously, smiling Jamie Dimon would very much love this to happen. And he has said this on many occasions that he believes that the banking system needs this exemption. And as I always say, Jamie Dimon gets what Jamie Dimon wants. Something else, stablecoins is obviously a very hot topic these days. If you combine stablecoins or US banks issuing dollar stablecoins throughout the market that pay no yield with an SLR exemption, they essentially become just like Tether. They pay nothing to allow people to invest in these stablecoins and use them for transfers. And then they get to take all that money, put it into US Treasury bills, and have no capital charge. And it's essentially infinite profit. So I expect that if this exemption goes through, which I think it will, you're going to see a very concerted effort by the large US banks to issue their own stablecoin because it's a way for them to earn a lot of net interest income. Now, this is a tweet or a truth or whatever you want to fucking call it from Trump on Fannie and Freddie. Essentially, these are the organizations that were issuing mortgages during the financial crisis. Before the 2008 financial crisis, they were very profitable. Now, what happens when you free Fannie and Freddie? Essentially, you take them out of conservatorship. Now, this has been a trade that's been talked about, for almost 2 years now. If you bought it at $1, it's probably trading at 11 now, these companies on the market. But you take them from conservatorship, they're allowed to take their equity capital, issue more debt with an implicit government guarantee, and lever it 33 times. And then they can buy up to $5 trillion worth of mortgages. This is $5 trillion of liquidity that is going to come into the market if you allow these two organizations to get back to business as usual. And so here are the fucking maths. Where do I get this idea that Bitcoin could hit $1 million? So if we think about QE for poor people, banks lending more into the real economy, I estimate that could be up to $3 trillion of bank credit that will be created between now and 2028. The statistic to look for is on the weekly Federal Reserve balance sheet, other deposits and liabilities. We'll see that happening there. If the banks are allowed to buy treasury bonds, it's estimated that $900 billion of foreign demand could evaporate. And that has to be replaced by commercial banks who now can buy these treasuries with infinite leverage. And finally, let's free Fannie and Freddie and bring $5 trillion of liquidity to the markets, which gets us close to $9 trillion printed or between now and 2028. And let's put this into context. During COVID, the COVID stimulus programs and all the aid that was given to the financial sector within the United States totaled about $4 trillion. And from the lows of March of 2020 to 70,000 in 2021 in November, we went up about 10x. Remember, price is set on the margin. It matters about the much larger marginal price, not the whole stock. And so if we have less Bitcoin on exchanges due to ETF demand, and we're printing double the amount of money between now and 2028 than when we did till COVID, then Bitcoin $1 million is just easy. Thank you very much. Hope to see you all at our party tonight.
Thank you so much, Arthur. We definitely will be.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine News Desk presented by Mara. It's day one of the largest Bitcoin conference in the world. Still so much more to come. You're going to hear from the Pakistan Crypto Council, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Bitcoin Standard author Saifedean Ammous, and Adam Back, the man who first corresponded with Satoshi all those years ago and went on to found Blockstream and other innovations. You just heard from Arthur Hayes, the BitMEX founder, pardoned by President Trump, giving his thesis for $1 million Bitcoin, here to bring an interesting perspective on that price appreciation. As an early Bitcoin miner and pioneer, James Howells from the United Kingdom. James, thanks for being here, and maybe you can share a little bit about your story. Obviously, some people might be very familiar. You've been in the headlines for years, but I think it really speaks to the price appreciation of Bitcoin. Your story, maybe you can fill us in.
Hi, Pete. Thank you for having me. What a great event. So obviously, many people might know my situation. It's been in the news quite a few times over the years. I was one of the first people involved in Bitcoin, and I managed to create quite a few thousand coins quite easily back in that day.
It was over 8,000, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. There's exactly 8,000 Bitcoins in my wallet address, which is verifiable on the blockchain right now. I've been trying to recover those coins for the last 12 years, ever since this first happened. And I've gone to Newport City Council, who are the owners of the landfill where this hard drive ended up. And I've tried to put proposals to them so that I can excavate and recover my property. Unfortunately, they've not been too friendly towards me.
Yeah. Well, certainly this is a story that many people sympathize with. No one is ever happy about losing Bitcoin, and I know it must be a harrowing experience for yourself to go through that. But it sounds like there's hope on the horizon and some new activity that you're looking to recover these Bitcoins, which are currently lost.
Well, I'll never give up on this plan. So after I put together a recovery team, a professional recovery team, and presented that case to Newport Council, they didn't want to know. So then I decided to launch legal action against Newport Council. 2 high court cases in the UK, which were completely swept under the carpet. I wasn't even given a full court case to present my case. So I've come away from there with a complete and utter loss, but that doesn't mean we give up, because the hard drive is still there and the data that I need to recover is still there.
I'm curious your thoughts on why there hasn't been more sympathy for your situation. You first came out with a story, I remember, in 2013, and it was a big deal that you had lost millions or thousands of dollars at that point. It's become millions. It's becoming multiple millions. Why do you think there is, or is there a sympathy with your situation? Because it seems like if the hard drive is there and it's recoverable, this could be a resource for not just yourself, but the region.
I've had assistance and help and sympathy from practically everybody except for Newport City Council. And they're the decision makers that I need on my team. So I went to court, and unfortunately that was, thrown out. So now we've come up with a new plan. The next plan is we'll be buying the landfill from them, whether they like it or not. We're going to make them an offer they can't refuse. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to tokenize a portion of the hard drive coins, 1,675 coins, which is 21%. I'm going to offer those as ordinals to the public. I'm going to raise approximately $75 million via that tokenization project. And my plan is to buy the landfill outright from Newport City Council, so I no longer have to beg for permission.
Who do you expect to be interested in this issuance? Obviously, we've seen things like this in the past, right? Major investors have come out, Strive, Ramaswamy's firm, looking to buy claims on Mt. Gox Bitcoins. We've seen exchanges like Bitfinex, they've tokenized their debt, made the people who recover or experience the loss whole again. Were you inspired by these projects? And if someone were to invest in something like this, which is a bit risky and unconventional, why would they participate?
I have been inspired by past projects. One of the projects that did inspire me was the effort by Bitcoiners to purchase a copy of the US Constitution. That is very similar to the plan that I propose. The reason why somebody would purchase one of my tokens is that each one of my tokens has got a Satoshi amount allocated to it. So if I then complete the plan, recover the coins, I will then have to allocate a portion of those coins back to the people who supported this recovery effort. I believe this story is so known wide. There's a lot of people who would invest into this at different price points. So we've got multiple tiers for different tokens, which offer different benefits and perks. And at the same time, we're also going to put the entire excavation process into a documentary series so that people can actually follow along with us.
Right, I did hear about that, yeah.
So they can actually follow along with us and see what we're doing and see the outcome.
Do you feel like this is becoming a race against time? Because, we know one of the things about software is that it, continues to perpetuate. Hardware, a different story. This is a hard drive in a landfill. Landfills notorious for toxic materials, debris. How confident are you that were you to find the hard drive, you could identify it, get it operational? I'm curious what work you've done there.
Well, I've had extensive conversations with a company called Drive Savers, who are based in LA. They've recovered multiple wallets with multi-million-dollar balances in the past. They're the best in the business of doing this, so I fully trust them. All I have to do is get them a physical hard drive, and they believe there's an 80 to 90% chance that they will recover the data. Now, the reason for that is on a multi-gigabyte hard drive, the data is actually stored in one specific location or sector of the disk. all I need to recover is 51 characters, which is bytes of data on a disk. Now, if this was a multi-gigabyte video file or an MP3 file, the data would be scattered on multiple points of the hard drive, which would make it harder to recover that data. The fact that we only need a minuscule amount of data increases our chances exponentially.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people out there admire your determination. You have kept up with this for close to a decade. How close have you stayed to the industry and the state of the art of the technology? Are you buying and holding Bitcoin still to this day? Or, you know, what have you done to kind of maybe help make sure others don't go through what you've had to experience?
Yeah, I still buy and hold Bitcoin on a daily basis. I've been dollar cost averaging since 2013. I use Bitcoin as well. I use crypto. I like to pay for things with Bitcoin. I believe there's a use case there for it. It's not just a store of value. We can actually use crypto, and we can use the digital tokenization of assets onto the Bitcoin blockchain, which can only increase the value of everybody else's coins together. So that's what I plan to do with an Ordinals token in order to raise $75 million. And that will be going live on 1st of October. We'll be dropping that at token 2049 in Singapore. We hope to sell out by the end of the year. And the current council they've said that they're willing to close the landfill in early 2026. So it's my intention to put an offer to Newport City Council through my legal representatives on the 3rd of January 2026.
Well, of course, we'll see some leaders from the UK here for the first time. Nigel Farage coming up at the conference amongst the major guests still to come. What would be your message to the United Kingdom, not seen as progressive on Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies? What would you say to Nigel if you had his ear?
I'm pretty sure Nigel is already a Bitcoiner. So it's not Nigel I need to convince. It's the rest of the British establishment that refuse to change. And they need to come to the table and realize the opportunities that they're missing out on. For example, if Newport City Council had come and spoke to me in 2013, the city of Newport now would look like Dubai. Instead, it looks like a hellhole.
Well, James, we wish you luck with that search. We're going to take it back now to our next programming. Stay here live on YouTube, Rumble, and X. We'll be right back after these messages.
Of supply and productivity and efficiency, but it's the energy necessary for Bitcoin mining or HPC or whatever that is the big bottleneck. And when Ether switched over to proof of stake, you lost this other competing force on the energy for Bitcoin mining, and all of this energy infrastructure, which was kind of going towards Ether, now all flooded towards Bitcoin mining as the highest value opportunity. Now with the HPC and the AI emergence, NVIDIA is kind of coming full circle, and they went from Ether and had a little bit of a lull, but now they're coming back in this space, and it's providing another high value opportunity for the energy. And I think that's going to be the real game changer here, because it's another bottleneck on growth on the Bitcoin network that we previously didn't have before ChatGPT emerged.
I want to talk to you both about M&A as well. So we'll start with Zach. CleanSpark, you've been pretty active in the M&A space since post-halving. What's your thesis on the current state of M&A and Bitcoin mining? Are we in the early stages, middle, late? What are you seeing?
You know, I think that Bitcoin is a finite asset, but the mining space can be an infinite game. And it's something that will always go into overtime. So I don't think it's about being in the beginning. It's almost like we're permanently in the middle. And again, where we're at is there's still a shaking of out event occurring. You know, as Bitcoin continues to rise, if you were struggling to make it when it was at 80, now you've got a new, you know, lease on life that's come into it. But it's creating opportunities, lots of opportunities for consolidation. And again, so we view it as we're going to pursue the opportunities, but we're doing so in the most capital efficient ways possible. We're also in a unique situation as a company where, you know, we're looking at the rewards for investors. There was a point in time where you were rewarded for growing almost for the sake of growing. That is gone as this industry has matured. It's about making sure that that growth delivers true shareholder value, which I think is a great thing for being a buyer, because it's a little bit of a buyer's market that we're still in. If Bitcoin continues to push, which, you know, I'm pretty bullish on and think it will happen, I think that consolidation will slow down a little bit. because it will make more sense to stay and wait to sell than it does to, rush into a sell right now.
You guys, Ben at Bitfarms just acquired Stronghold Digital. It was a acquisition that was in the making for a couple years. How do you feel post-merger? Are you guys happy with it? How has that affected your capital strategy? And what are some of the things that you've learned in the last couple of months since that acquisition closed?
Yeah, I mean, we're thrilled with the assets that we picked up there. We've always viewed this as an energy portfolio management business. And I think for years, Bitfarms has really been focused on the international growth. We started in Canada, we did some expansion in the US, and then we went off into Latin America. But when we're looking at what is the higher value opportunities, where are we getting the most value out of our megawatts, where should we be investing the next dollar? It's in the United States. That's clearly where there's the most energy infrastructure, there's the most opportunity, there's the lowest cost of capital, there's the most demand. And so we have not only acquired Stronghold, but we actually divested the largest site that we've ever produced in Paraguay. We did that simultaneously at the same time. And it was about how do we manage an energy portfolio of hard infrastructure assets. And it's a lot easier said than done to manage physical infrastructure. But we, effectively said, let's just focus on the best opportunities that we've identified, which is this US infrastructure, and how do we vertically integrate up the chain and get this big pipeline of capacity in the United States. So we divested our Bitcoin mining assets that we didn't want. We acquired these assets that we really wanted. And that's opened up a whole new world of opportunities for us as a company. And it's opening up whole new worlds for us in terms of the capital markets as well, because it's way easier to raise capital and to finance infrastructure in the United States than it is in Latin America.
You guys have historically diversified geographically. Is that still part of your play? And how is that going for you guys now that you have a bigger presence here in the US as well?
We're still, a very international company, but our focus right now is on North America. So prior to these two transactions, we were actually going to be the majority of our infrastructure was going to be in Latin America. Now the majority of our infrastructure is in North America, and almost all of our growth is in the United States. So, we still have international assets, but when we're sort of looking at where's that next dollar go, it's going right here in the US, it's going into rural areas, Pennsylvania, it's going into solving the biggest challenge that compute markets have, which is the energy bottleneck. Where are you going to get the energy? How are you going to get the energy? And how can you plan that infrastructure over time? And by focusing on these rural areas in Pennsylvania, we're able to solve that problem way better than we were investing in Latin America.
Talked about consolidation a little bit in the beginning, but there are new entrants into the market. Specifically, we've seen American Bitcoin come in recently saying they want to dominate the Bitcoin mining space. How has that reshaped or maybe affected how you guys see competition in the mining space in 2025 and beyond?
There's always going to be competition where there's opportunity. And for us, it's always about staying on the head of the efficiency curve. So we've invested heavily in optimization from day one. And so we feel really strongly about our competitive advantages and rolling through that. I think it just comes down to also when we see new entrants, we know that it doesn't matter if you're big or small or how big a balance sheet you have. There's a lot to learn. Bitcoin mining isn't just plugging in a machine and walking away. There's a lot of optimization that adds up to, at scale to tens of millions of dollars a year. And so we will always keep an eye on it. We will see obviously difficulty increase, but we also know that the learning curve is steep. So I would say we're very comfortable with where we're at and just maintain our edge from an efficiency point of view.
Ben, anything to add on that competition?
I think when you're looking at how do you optimize and how you're managing, this is a competitive space, but it's not a competitive space that's usually a hostile space. It's one of the only industries that I know of in the planet where we face so much hostility from external forces that internally, even within the industry, everyone is friends, everyone is brethren, everyone wants to support and help each other. I don't think anything has changed there. I think there's a lot of political pressure, there's a lot of external pressure we face, but at the end of the day, whether you're at CleanSpark or you're at Bitfarms, you're a Bitcoiner. And that's what's really, really important. And that's what drives it forward. And, usually the rising tides lift all boats in this space.
Something that has changed is profit margins have gotten tighter. You guys both have very different approaches at your companies to raising capital. What lessons have you guys learned? We can go first with Zach about operating a sustainably responsible Bitcoin mining company in this environment.
Yeah, it was something that we pushed really hard as we approached the halving, and we term it as escape velocity. There's really a minimum size that you need to be as a public miner to shift into a high level of profitability. And it's a place that we have reached. And so we're at a point where we can self-sustain operations. And we can also not only sustain operations, but continue to build our Bitcoin balance. So how we're looking into it is we went through a phase where we built our Bitcoin balance to a target, which was about $1 billion, which we've now surpassed. And now we're using Bitcoin to get more Bitcoin. So rather than seeking outside capital to sustain our operations, we're using Bitcoin to do it. But because of our scale, we're able to have, between 40 and 60% of the Bitcoin left over at the end of every month and add that to our balance. We're also looking at a third leg to add to the profitability of the company, and that is we are investing our Bitcoin. Simple things, whether it's covered calls or things like that. But when you have a very large balance of Bitcoin, it becomes another opportunity to use as a revenue stream. We're incredibly conservative about it. We're still in what we refer to as our crawl phase, but we are looking for capital that we generate ourselves to create shareholder value rather than looking external. Because I think that the mining space, I think it's well known from a valuation point of view, Bitcoin has been outpacing it. And this happens all the time. We're looking and waiting for the time for it to catch up. And, debt is also a great opportunity when managed wisely to fund the business into the future. All of that requires scale. And so those are the areas that we're looking at to fund growth, because we prefer to avoid the equity markets for the foreseeable future.
Ben, talk to me about your equity dilution strategy at Bitfarms.
Bitcoin mining is a capitally intensive industry. And any compute business is. And when you're in a capitally intensive industry, your capital strategy is ultimately probably your most important factor for success. If you're able to raise more capital at a lower price, you're infinitely more competitive. And if you can't raise capital at cost-effective prices, there's nothing that you can do on the operational side that will outweigh the higher cost of capital. So it's a really, really important part of the business. I think the industry is constantly evolving. And in the last bull run of 2021, there's all these companies flooding into the space, looking to do miner financing and try and break in and disrupt the space on the financing side. And unfortunately, it's very, very hard to do that in a traditional sense when you have the underlying Bitcoin volatility. What we're seeing now is that this entire space is changing at such an exponential rate that all of the capital strategies have changed. The kinds of people who are looking to raise capital or trying to give capital to these kind of companies are changing. The structures are changing. And if you would have asked me a question around capital structure, maybe over the last 2 years, the question wouldn't have been about your capital strategy. It would have been, is there any capital available at all? Now, miners can be discriminatory. They can start allocating to different strategies. They can be more sophisticated. And this is even more true when you're looking at the HPC side of things, where the underlying volatility doesn't exist. And so, for instance, we just raised a $300 million facility with Macquarie Group in order to develop out HPC at one of the stronghold sites that we acquired in Pennsylvania. And that has an 8% coupon on it. Compared to what you pay for equity issuance or the kind of cost of capital that the mining industry experienced over the last couple of years, that 8% is incredibly cost effective. And as companies develop and they show more and more progress towards the HPC, there's going to be way more opportunities to constantly raise more capital at increasingly lower rates. So this industry is completely different. The amount of capital that's available now for digital assets and digital compute, it just didn't exist. a year ago or 2 years ago. And right now, everyone's trying to ask, how do I get exposure? And all these companies out here like Bitfarms and CleanSpark are providing different solutions to give these companies exposure who want access to this really, really exciting space that is outperforming almost everything else.
The price of Bitcoin is going up, which everybody here likes to hear. But in an environment where the Bitcoin price stays flat or stagnant for a little while, what would you say are the most viable sources of capital for miners in that situation? How would you guys handle that?
You know, I think that if it stays stagnant at 100,000, I think we're all still pretty happy. But, you know, it just comes down to growing at the right time. And again, on a counter-cyclical basis. I think that patience is what that would take and require in the space. Being flexible, adjusting plans, not being over leveraged. It's the decision you made yesterday that is going to matter in an event like that. Do you have too much leverage? Can you service your debt? Are there bigger problems with your business, you know, fundamentally? And so, again, staying on the cutting edge of efficiency has allowed us to be at the right place, right time. We would frankly probably welcome even an environment like that because we think it would create a different kind of opportunity. You asked a question about what inning are we in from a acquisition consolidation space. Pain creates opportunity in different portions of the market. It also creates, I think, a strong network though, because it really shows the resilience the Bitcoin network has. We don't need Bitcoin to double, you know, overnight every year to have a very strong network globally. So it just further proves the resistance of what Bitcoin is.
Anything to add, Bilal, on that?
No, I think you want to raise capital at the right times. And when you're investing in a space like this, and we did an analysis of every single Bitcoin miner we've ever purchased from 2017 rolling forward. And we looked at when we purchased the miners, what price we paid, the manufacturer, the model, the efficiency, the electricity price. We looked at all these different variables. And the number one determiner of success was the timing of when you bought the miner. You know, this is a highly volatile space. You can't outrun the underlying economics. And so, you know, when we looked at this, it was going into a Bitcoin mining halving and just exiting a Bitcoin mining halving when the fear and the uncertainty around what is going to happen with Bitcoin, that provides the lowest prices on the Bitcoin miners and the most opportunity. So what we did was going into the end of 2023 and entering the halving in 2024, we had put together a whole strategy around upgrading all of our fleet. We did over 83,000 miners purchased, deployed. We pulled down over 50,000 miners. It was a massive, massive upgrade. And the way that we look at it is a little bit differently than I think, you know, a lot of other companies look at it. And we're really trying to grow at strategic points in time to maximize our return on invested capital. And if we're not trying to do that, then I think we're doing a disservice to our shareholders. The challenge there is that shareholders, and I think most of the market, wants linear growth in perpetuity throughout time. And this is not a space that rewards linear growth in Bitcoin miners over time. You really want to try and focus on when you're making your investments, when you're going, you know, putting your chips all in on the table. I think we did that really well at Bitfarms. And for where we are right now, we now have our Bitcoin mining infrastructure upgraded. All of our miners are effectively deployed. We have that upside to Bitcoin's rising prices, but we're not running out there to buy more Bitcoin miners today. For that next dollar that we're
What is the key to progress? Is it more machines, more money, more buildings? Or are those just the outcomes? What if progress relies on having purpose?
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine News Desk presented by Mara. I am Frank Corva, the political correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine. To my left, we have Steve Lee, all the way at the left over there, lead at Spiral. We have Max next to him, founder at Hivemind Ventures. And we have DK to my left right here, host of Presidio Bitcoin. And from the main stage, we just heard from Ben Gagnon of Bitfarms, as well as Zach Bradford of CleanSpark and Eleanor Terrett of Crypto in America. Today, we're going to be giving you guys a little bit of a taste of the Presidio Bitcoin Jam. But first, I want to go over to you, Steve. Please tell us a little bit about that hat you're wearing there.
Yeah, it's an important message to share. It's everyone should go to saveourwallets.org. Congressman Tom Emmer has just proposed this bill. It's like one page. It's very simple. If a business or service does not custody people's money, it should not be considered a money transmitter or money services business. And as we saw under the last administration, there was the DOJ action against some companies and developers. So it's an important bill to pass to get clarification, and everyone should learn about it and find their own way to support it, either talking to the service provider they use or talking to their local constituent.
Okay, so saveourwallets.org, is that where people should go?
Yeah.
Perfect, saveourwallets.org. Max, let me go over to you.
Yeah.
So with Presidio Bitcoin, what do you do? We're trying to bridge here Silicon Valley with Bitcoin, right? It seems like that should be sort of a marriage made in heaven, but tell us a little bit about what this process is like.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it kind of was, right? If you go pre the block size war, San Francisco and Silicon Valley was very much the heart of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And then, as you guys remember, the Bitcoin conference used to be in San Francisco. Then, of course, a lot of the traditional venture capital and big money ended up going into, the whole shitcoin industry, and we've all seen what's happened there. However, I think there's a moment now, which is we realize that, Bitcoin has already established itself as an incredible store of value. And I think we're really ready to see it become a medium of exchange for humans, for artificial intelligence, which we'll talk more about. And for us, Presidio Bitcoin is a new co-working space launched a few months ago. We've been doing this podcast, Presidio Bitcoin Jam, for about 6 months now. And our goal is, how do we make sure the best minds in Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr, connecting with the best minds in capital, frankly, in Silicon Valley, to build the next generation of payments on the web.
Appreciate that. So Nostr, I like to hear Nostr included in there too. Very cool. So Nostr, I like to consider Nostr. Yeah, shout out to Nostr, the world's biggest circular economy. I like to call it the world's biggest Bitcoin circular economy. Other topics that you tend to touch on, DK?
Well, yeah, we like to think about Presidio Bitcoin Jam as just what will we talk about in our own group chat. So it's whatever's happening in the world, and it's often whatever's happening in building things and in Bitcoin and Lightning and Nostr. So these days it feels like it's all AI. Everything that we're talking about is how do you use AI as a tool to help more people create more things. Traditionally, Silicon Valley takes tons of capital and big teams to build things. Now the individual is empowered to build. So we end up talking about that a lot. I kind of call myself a semi-amateur vibe coder.
Oh, okay. All right.
Spend most of my time doing that.
Semi-amateur vibe coder. Very into it. Yeah.
And it's pretty badass, actually. For those who haven't seen, I think it's still up, pbhackathon.com. We just held the first Presidio Bitcoin hackathon with two sort of broad, I would say, tracks of fusing Bitcoin and AI. One is the DK and Matt Belez sort of path of, can you vibe code and easily integrate Bitcoin payments in there? And then the second path was, are we finally at a stage, and this has been sort of an obsession for me, and shout out to Mr. Steven going around from Block. He's been thinking about this a lot as well. Can we have autonomous digital life, which is going to be using Bitcoin as an energy-backed currency? So if you guys are interested, I don't know if it's still on the website, but we had some incredible projects, 5 or 6, that I think are, hopefully going to push the envelope on what we do with Bitcoin and AI.
And what was my biggest takeaway from the hackathon was that in 24 hours, people went from concept to working application that integrated Bitcoin payments and Nostr, and many of them integrated Nostr as well, including some of the top projects were people who were not developers. Anyone can build now. If you have a good idea, you can build. We proved it in this hackathon that within 24 hours, people who didn't code a line were able to build a working product. And they got, like, one of them got 3rd place and one got 4th place.
I have to ask if you don't mind there. So I think about this a lot. I haven't gotten into vibe coding myself. I plan to. It's on my list of things to do. Do people have to look over the code that gets vibe coded? Does a proper coder have to look it over just to make sure everything is okay?
I think it depends on your goal. So if your goal, some people are building applications, just one-off throwaway applications. They have a need and they just build the application, fulfill that need. You don't have to look at the code as long as it meets your need. if you're building a prototype or just demonstrating to the world what I can build, or here's my idea, and I want to show it to you, you don't need to look at the code. If you're going to build a wallet that's securing people's money and you have millions of people, you still want human engineers reviewing the security and looking at the code.
I had a feeling that might be the case. Can we talk a little bit about this symbiosis of Bitcoin and AI? Is it inevitable that Bitcoin becomes the money of AI?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I mean, for me, my like longtime thesis, I come from the energy industry, is that Bitcoin eventually, forget all of the blockchain and everything else, which is our enabling technologies, but will be recognized as a ledger, the only currency of the known universe, which is joules, energy. And so I think for the AIs, if you think about it, like even as the cost of software, everything goes to zero, there's still one real world cost, which is computational energy. So if they're going to eventually be paying for their own GPUs, their own bandwidth, their own storage, their own real world resources, they need, I believe, an energy backed currency. Is it possible that something else comes along better than Bitcoin in the future? Maybe. But for the foreseeable future, I don't think there's anything close to it.
They also, permissionless money will matter to AI, like agentic AI as well. They won't be able to fill out a KYC form to use a payment rails or use a money. So I think it'll be a very natural fit. I think the AI will figure out the best money to use is Bitcoin.
Okay, well, I'm learning something here, gentlemen. I wanted to ask you too. So is a lot of what you're doing with the Presidio Bitcoin Jam, is it education focused? Is it more sort of, you have kind of the attention of Silicon Valley, but now you're trying to sort of show them how Bitcoin fits into their equation?
Yeah, well, all three of us have lived in Silicon Valley for like 20 years. I mean, at least David and I worked at Google for a long time. So we come from that world. The three of us are also very hardcore Bitcoiners. So we know both worlds. And I think generally there's a big gap between the two worlds right now. A lot of people in Silicon Valley don't get Bitcoin. Most don't. And then a lot of Bitcoiners may roll their eyes at Silicon Valley. So I think we can do a great job at bridging the gap between the two. And so our target audience is big tech in Silicon Valley.
And I think a lot of the way Bitcoin is perceived in the world is like this store of value, this thing you should hold. And we agree with that, but we don't think it's just that. And we think it should be something that can be used for building new applications on the web, things that you've not even imagined yet. And so if people want to contribute to Bitcoin, you should hold it, sure. But the message that part of what I get excited about is that you can actually build anything you want, even if you're not a developer, and you don't need to look at the code. There's other people who look at the code that gets incorporated into the final, what you're doing with the money, what you're doing with the signing transactions. But you can build all kinds of applications that don't worry about Bitcoin, blockchain, payments, how it all works. You just use it as a component. So Bitcoin now can become just this foundation that everybody can build their own dream app that doesn't have to be on Bitcoin or on a blockchain or something like that. You can build any app that requires money or value exchange, which is everything in the world.
And I think one of the things that's very important, because you mentioned you're excited about Nostr, which to your point now has over 5 million payments, making it the largest Bitcoin circular economy by payment volume out there. Now that we have, the way I think about it is the full protocol stack, Bitcoin as value, the Lightning Network and sort of adjacent pieces, maybe Cash or something like that in the future for payments. And now we have Nostr for identity and data transmission. The thing is, many of these people in Silicon Valley, they see Bitcoin and they're like, okay, we're not into gold, we're not into finance. The reason they got into Ethereum is not that they're all scammers, some of them are, but the vast majority wanted to build cool shit. And so now if you come in them and you say your idea that you want to build with your, decentralized social media, your decentralized any internet application, with Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr, you can build that today. Their eyes light up, and I think that to me has been one of the big learnings.
And I think the timing is now. Spiral builds development tools. So like 4 years ago, we watched developers try to integrate Bitcoin payments in their application, and it would take like multiple talented developers a year to build an application. Now, like we just said, a non-developer in 24 hours can build an application. So that is more Silicon Valley's jam. Silicon Valley wants to build fast, move fast. And I think that's why they were attracted to Ethereum for a long time. But now you can build really fast and unleash creativity on Bitcoin today.
This is amazing. It brings to mind one thing. What I think about when I hear all this stuff, you could build this quickly. It's that easy to do. Where does someone start? Someone who's listening to this saying, you know what? I feel it in my gut. I'm a vibe coder. I could just feel this is what I got to do next. Where should they go? What website should they check into? Where should they go to start vibe coding and creating some of these apps?
Yeah, there's a lot of great tools. I mean, I've been on the journey myself and played with so many different ones. I start with Replit Agent. You don't need to understand anything about how you deploy it. You can pull things in. Our friend Matt built a great app called High Fives that he fully deployed with both Lightning payments and Nostr identities.
deployed it with Replit Agent, and it's out there, and he didn't write a line of code. So anybody who has an idea can do it, just simple soup to nuts there. And then you can go to more advanced tools like we've used Cursor and Windsurf and Klein and Goose. All kinds of, like, all these tools are using underlying LLMs to actually do the coding for you. You can review them in various cases, but you don't actually have to understand it. It's more like you give into the vibes. You just let it happen, right? So that's the whole point of vibe coding is you don't have to understand it, but there are people who understand it. And if you want to, you can open the covers and look under and see how it all works.
Okay, I have one major last question here. Is it like Bitcoin that once you get it, you can't look away? Once you get into vibe coding, are you then just hooked? Do you just become a vibe coder for life? Is that how things work?
Well, I can't say I'm nearly as much of a vibe coder as DK here. I mean, the one thing I would say is, yes, there are certainly people like DK, like other friends of ours that are getting hooked. I mean, what I would say is when you lower the barrier to creativity, everyone is naturally creative. We as human beings are a creative species. And so, of course, we're going to enjoy being creative and making more. But what I would tell everyone is, similar to Bitcoin, kind of zoom out. Like 2 years ago, you couldn't do any of this. So imagine, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to be able to literally speak things into existence. And then you think, where is the actual scarcity in that world? Well, Bitcoin, Lightning Network payments, et cetera.
Yeah, this might seem even overwhelming to some. What does the world look like? Let's talk about this 5, 6 years down the road with all this coming. Bitcoin, AI, merger. What does the world look like in your mind, Steve?
Well, some other exciting announcements this week and last week are like Steak and Shake accepting Bitcoin. Square merchants are going to be able to accept Bitcoin now. Yep. So we're seeing it from a lot of different angles. So I think over the next 5 years, the network is just going to grow. And so there's going to be more people with a wallet on their phone where they can spend, and then people will accept it. So I think we're going to see a lot of niches grow over the next several years, and then 5 years from now, whether it's AI or humans, there'll be a lot of Bitcoin payments.
And I would also say maybe zoom out and think about the category and frequency of payments can change by orders of magnitude, right? So in the same way that once we got the internet, we were able to have completely new business models. It wasn't just bring the New York Times online. We got Twitter. Similarly, I think once you have free instant microtransactions for tens of millions and then hundreds of millions and then trillions and then quadrillions of agents out there, the kinds of transactions they're doing with each other at the speed of light, the ability to take 100, 1,000 payments together, put all of the pieces of data together, it's going to be a wild web. And I hope it's an open one. With Bitcoin and Lightning and Nostr, it can be. The alternative is a lot less exciting.
Yeah, appreciate that. DK, final thought. We're about to head back to the Nakamoto stage. Anything we didn't touch on here?
Yeah, I mean, I just think everybody who is a Bitcoiner should be building for Bitcoin. You don't have to be running a small shop and selling coffee. That's good. We have those tools now too. But you can actually build the application of your dream, something you've never dreamt of. You can actually be a builder in this new world. And I just encourage everybody who's a Bitcoin holder to start to become a Bitcoin builder, just with your own hobbies.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Yeah, Steve.
If I could just show our show.
Please, of course.
If you want to follow our show, we do it live every Friday, 90 minutes. And you can find us on YouTube or social media, Presidio Bitcoin.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Vibes are high here at Bitcoin 2025. Yeah. Vibe coding is the way of the future. Things are good. We're heading over to the Nakamoto stage to hear about retail Bitcoin investment, the front running of Wall Street. We'll be right back here at the live desk after this.
It's these people and my
invest in crypto at any point and do it on a recurring basis as well. And at the end of the day, like with Bitcoin especially, you will have to have a strategy to do it on a regular basis. It's pretty hard to time a market like this. And so I think
what we're trying to focus on is making sure customers understand like how to get into it and have access to Bitcoin easily.
The question was on what indicators Wall Street might be looking at. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, the obvious answer, if you're one of these large firms, particularly like look at like a large bank, a large broker, is to look to your customer base, right? And so they're looking at a few different things. They're looking at, back in the day, how many of my customers are buying GBTC? How many of my customers now are buying the various ETFs out there? And a big one they're also looking at almost across the board are how much of my customer deposits are leaving our bank accounts, leaving our brokerage accounts, and going to places that likely mean they're buying Bitcoin or crypto. You know, Kraken, Robinhood, you name it, in the various different, like, they have that data. You know, this is across the board. They're all looking at that data, and that's like one of their biggest indicators. You know, when it comes to kind of like their high net worth client bases, I mean, that's just they're communicating with them directly, and they're getting asked these questions on like, hey, when are you guys going to support this? When am I going to be able to borrow against my Bitcoin? When am I going to be able to buy Bitcoin? So on and so forth. So they're looking at their customer base, and that's like really the impetus here. Again, starts with the individuals.
Can I just say, if I look at Glassnode reports, which I think are very good, they give you a strong sense of, you know, how long have people been holding their Bitcoin and where have they been holding their Bitcoin? You know, I think we're all Bitcoin holders, so we're obsessed with the price. But if you think about Wall Street coming in, what would I suggest that they look at? It would be, you know, what do those reports and indicators tell you? You know, a little bit about the sentiment. Are people holding Bitcoin longer term, or are they taking profit, and therefore that might anticipate the price coming down? And as we see more and more people using services like Xapho or others, there's an element of trust in the industry that was maybe destroyed a little bit after FTX. And if you think about why is that needed and relevant, well, because the more things you can do with your Bitcoin, the more that the industry will grow. And if you're thinking about, okay, how do we all benefit from that growth of the industry? How does Bitcoin become mainstream? I think there's going to be an element of Bitcoin having to bridge financial services. So if you're seeing a movement of Bitcoin from self-custody towards you know, providers like ourselves or some of my other colleagues here, then that's a strong indicator, I think, that there's trust is back.
Kima, it's really simple. And I hope I make my Econ 101 professor proud. There's a lot of metrics out there. I think the only one that generally matters is supply and demand. We are trying to build a better form of money, a better financial system, and the supply is limited. And every day, week, month, year, demand is going to grow and grow and grow, whether it's retail, Wall Street, countries, states, companies, that demand is going to spike. And with a limited supply in general, things just move one way, and it's an exciting chapter.
Let's dig a little deeper on this and talk about Bitcoin's next catalyst. Is it as simple as pension funds? I would say the last catalyst would have been the ETFs in 2024, strategic Bitcoin reserve. Maybe we haven't seen the effects of that yet, but what is that next catalyst that may lead to a Bitcoin supply shock?
Yeah, I could jump again. People talk about the reserve and corporate treasuries, and those are absolutely right. The thing I think that's not talked about the most is financial advisors in the United States. We have over 300,000 financial advisors in the United States who meet with their clients every month, week, quarter, and they're talking about stocks, bonds, those kind of things, mutual funds. And most of those financial advisors are not allowed to recommend to talk about Bitcoin and those kind of products. And those dominoes are going to keep falling rapidly. And so you're going to have this army of financial advisors from traditional finance, I think soon, recommending Bitcoin ETFs to their own customers. And so we have this upcoming like Bitcoin marketing team that I don't think people are talking about enough. And I'm excited for it to happen. It's a win for the industry. It's a win for those companies, but ultimately consumers who they've heard of Bitcoin, but they don't know what it's about. And when they're sitting across the table from someone they trust and know, and now that person's telling them about Bitcoin, I think that's going to make a huge difference.
Would you say 50% are still not able to recommend, or do we know those numbers?
It is way less. I think it's probably 10%. And some of these financial firms have 20,000 financial advisors, 15,000 financial advisors that they're not allowed to talk about it. And I think in 5 years, they all are.
I mean, if you just even look at the top 5, they're not doing it right now, and that's like well over half, the total space. I'd probably rank that group maybe number 1. A close, second is just like all of the opening up the actual true retail banks, brokers, all the large, with tens, hundreds of millions of clients. And then probably third behind that might be the government side of things. We're starting to see Mubadala has a position in Bitcoin and these types of things. I don't know where Michael is out there. I don't know that like the corporate treasuries is going to be like that big of a driver vis-a-vis some of these other pieces and just how much capital's out there. And then I think probably the other, institutions fall in line behind it, pensions, endowments, and so forth.
I think for me, this idea that institutions are driving this catalyst at the moment, I think is fairly true. I think there's 2 other things out there that will happen in the future. When, I don't know, but one is, we're on this journey where we're making Bitcoin easier and more accessible for it to become mainstream. So everybody in this room loves Bitcoin, right? But we don't want to be an echo chamber. How do you make it easy for my mum or your mum to be able to use Bitcoin so that you democratize finance through Bitcoin? Well, not everybody can think about seed phrasing or think about how to keep their coin safe. So there's going to be that sort of within the retail space. There's also much more that can be done to make Bitcoin much more mainstream and more than just sort of a price speculative asset. And that leads to the other catalyst, which we'll see probably longer into the future, which is using Bitcoin as a form of enabling cross-border payments. So at the moment, we think about, well, it's just a store of value. The payment use case is dead. I don't think it is. I think you think about the internet and where the internet was in the 90s versus where it's now with streaming. HTTP is still the same protocol. But think about all the layer 2s and even 3s that were built on top of the internet. And I think that there's still a lot of innovation that can happen on the payment side, but that's probably for the next cycle or maybe even the one after that.
Yeah, I think one thing we forget a bit is, 10 years ago, the discussion when we were coming here at the conference was, is Bitcoin a vaporware? Is it something that is actually serious? People were still debating if it's something that will even exist in a few years. So, something you have to remember is there's only 21 million Bitcoin, right? And so when you see all this company creating treasuries with Bitcoin, when you see all these countries creating strategic reserve, not just the US, there are more and more starting to look into it. At some point there will be this effect where there's not that many Bitcoin, and therefore the interest will keep going. And I think if you look at the past 2 years, like we had so much development, the ETF, all this IRA and 401ks that can now get access to Bitcoin easily, all this brokerage account that can access Bitcoin easily. You also have all the spot platform being democratized more and more. And so right now it's not about a question of like, is Bitcoin going to exist? It's more a question of like, how much can you get and how much can you hedge your company or your personal finance against Bitcoin?
Show of hands out there in the audience. How many of you guys were here at Bitcoin conference last year and saw my panel? Okay, thank you for coming out again. You guys will remember I was on stage with 2 of the members today. So I want to first give it to Johan and Dave. And last year we had a similar topic of retail versus Wall Street getting into Bitcoin. Since then, Bitcoin has exploded. So my question to you guys, I want to keep you guys honest. What have you done or what has been done to keep making sure retail has an edge in this big Wall Street accumulation in the last year from you guys?
Ensure that retail keeps their edge. Look, I think the reality is that okay, so last year we were at a place where Wall Street was largely still in a place where they weren't increasing adoption whatsoever. Clearly, the regulation, both here in the U.S. and with MiCA in Europe and other places around the world, have kind of changed that equation, and adoption is now on the move, largely because of that driver. I think, as far as like retail keeping their edge, we're still in a situation now where, for the most part, the institutions are going to, have access to and experiment with, work with a fraction of all of what crypto has to offer. I mean, it'll be Bitcoin only. It'll be potentially, borrowing, lending against Bitcoin and like a few narrow things, and not getting into the full set of services that a company like Kraken offers when you talk about 300 plus assets, staking across several dozen assets, derivatives, all these various different pieces that are already there available for individuals on kind of like a equal and open platform. So not to mention, we haven't even started with DeFi, which, certainly doesn't have, even regulation for the most part doesn't, resurrect barriers for individuals vis-a-vis institutions there. So I think there's a lot of things that just point to this is, there isn't going to be that dynamic that arises for crypto. Just given both the starting, where we've been, the current starting point of where we are in this adoption cycle, and then again, the existence of, DeFi itself and decentralized finance.
Johan, do you guys have an Wall Street OTC arm, or is it just pure retail?
Currently, Robinhood is only pure retail. We do have an acquisition coming up of Bitstamp that we're supposed to close, and they do have an OTC desk. And we also announced the acquisition of WonderFi in Canada that also has an OTC desk. So it's definitely something we are looking at. And to answer your question on the advantage of retail, I think it's just the speed of execution. For most customer here in this room can learn about Bitcoin, can learn about how to get it. Compare that to an institution where you need to have 20 meetings at least to convince your treasury to start looking at Bitcoin. And then if you think about all the ETF, and at the end of the day, you don't really know the price of the underlying asset, right? Like when you buy on an ETF. And so most of these corporations that are using ETF for that have a disadvantage on retail. And I think the people that are curious and able to learn about Bitcoin, able to use platform like ours to buy Bitcoin, they can actually control everything. They can control the price, they can control the custody, they can transfer it out and keep it on their own wallet. They have a lot of advantage compared to the institution that have like regulation where they cannot even decide where to custody the assets.
Seamus and Andrew, what are we missing? What happens to make sure retail keeps their edge in this next year?
So eToro, we've been offering Bitcoin since 2013, and we are passionate about empowering investors and educating them. And so something that we really press on is investor education. We have tons of courses, and we even started paying customers recently to take courses and take quizzes to learn about Bitcoin, learn about financial markets, learn about stocks, because we're that passionate about it. And we also have a whole social media platform within the same app where you can buy Bitcoin, crypto, stocks, ETFs, where investors can share ideas, look to each other for advice. Because all of us in this room, we get Bitcoin or passionate about it, but most of the people living their lives outside of this world, they're not as familiar with it. So we love being a platform where people can come and ask ideas, ask for advice. And I think just continuing to push into education and empowerment is going to be massive. And then like what I said before, these financial advisors from Wall Street are going to do a lot of free work for us in this community, educating their own customers along the way.
For us, as we think about Bitcoin in the retail space, most people think about Bitcoin as something that you have on an exchange. We think of it, when you have your bank account at Zappa, you have a dollar bank account and you have a Bitcoin bank account. So we think of it as money. So if you think about what are the basic things that you expect when you open up a bank account, that your money is safe, you get an IBAN to send and receive money, you get a card to spend it, you get a savings account, some yield, and you can borrow. That's exactly what we have been trying to build over the last 4 or 5 years on the Bitcoin bank side, which is replicating that same experience with Bitcoin. So at Zappo, oldest custodian around since 2013, our infamous Swiss banker, Lightning, Bitcoin in and out with stablecoins added to it. You can spend Bitcoin with your card, you can earn yield on your Bitcoin, and you can borrow against it. So all of a sudden, having a bridge between traditional finance and this Bitcoin bank account just adds superpowers to your Bitcoin. You've got all these things that you can do with your Bitcoin in one place. And I think that today, if you want to do anything with your Bitcoin, it carries a lot of risk. You have to move your Bitcoin around, or you have to take it out of self-storage. So I think we design our product for it to be super simple to use so that anybody can use it. My asset test that I give to my UX designers is, could my mum use this? And she does. She actually does have a bank account at Zappa. So I think that's what I think is missing. It's like, how do we move from beyond trading and thinking about Bitcoin as money?
I want to pose this next question to all of you, and it's something every single person watching this stream or out in the audience right now is wondering. Bitcoin price, just for fun, by next year. I want to start with Dave, because Dave, you're one of the guys last year on this panel that had the guts in the depths of the price not moving to say, by this summer, so this year, you thought Bitcoin would be at around $140,000. Has it played out like you thought?
What's the first day of summer? It's I think June 22nd, something like that. We're gonna get there. Yeah, look, it's interesting. I'm actually been like a believer in the 4-year cycle for what it's worth. I mean, I got into crypto in the earlier part of 2013, so I've been through this whole bear bull thing or bull bear thing a bunch of times now. For the most part, I've kind of like, become a believer of the 4-year cycle. For what it's worth, I do think each cycle, each of the 4-year cycles become more muted than the previous one. The highs are not as high and the lows are not as low, and so on and so forth. And so I think that is going to continue, probably to the point to where the 4-year cycle kind of dissipates. And I think we're almost probably going to see that around now, for what it's worth. But yeah, look, over the next few months, over this summer, based on the activity that we're seeing, the positive developments on the regulatory side, pushing in, more businesses, institutions that adopt. I think, frankly, a lot of the exciting things that we're seeing on tokenized real world assets, driving more interest and adoption. We're launching tokenized equities this coming month as well. And so I think there's just a huge number of things that point to kind of continued adoption and growth and excitement and so forth. And so this summer, yeah, I think we're headed for higher highs at this point in time over the next, handful of months and probably throughout the rest of the year.
And to reset the question, by when we're all on stage next year, just for fun, how high do you think Bitcoin will have gotten to?
All right, I'll jump in. When I face a tough question, I do two things. First, I ask my wife. And second, I ask ChatGPT. I will not say in which order I do that. And so I pulled both of these sources of information. ChatGPT, when I did this prompt, said 142,000 by the next Bitcoin conference. When I asked my wife, she said 150,000. After almost 20 years of marriage, I've learned to never disagree with my wife, but I will on this. And I think it's going to be higher. I think it will be close to 200,000 by next year for the various factors that we talked about here today.
Johan of Robinhood, I know you see the data, the on-chain data. What do you think?
Well, I usually love this question because I started to mine 15 years ago when you didn't even need an ASIC to mine Bitcoin. You could just do it with your computer back in the days. And obviously, I'm still here working, so I made some bad decision around pricing estimation. But I think, at this point, I learned my lesson from this year's, and my focus is really much more on the accumulation and making sure that I can get as much of the 21 million Bitcoin as possible, and then we'll see where the price goes. But
Seamus?
Well, let me start by saying I normally don't like to play the price prediction game because I always say my customers or tell my customers that Bitcoin is something that you should think about medium to long term. So don't obsess about the price, just hold it. But since you asked me the question, I think, look, this year we've still got some all-time highs to see. Might hit 150, 200, somewhere in that range. But my fear for next year, though, is I think it might go lower. And I know that's not going to be a popular opinion. But the reason for that is, a bit to Dave's point about cycles, I think we all want Bitcoin to do well, but you can't rush Bitcoin. Bitcoin will take its time to do what it needs to do. And as the adoption picks up, the US is doing a huge effort right now to bring the industry here. That's going to be incredible, but it's going to take time. And I think that maybe next year people will sort of get a bit impatient and go, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I might take some profit. And then that brings the price back down. So I don't think it'll be a spectacular crash, but I think we might be back into the 90s sort of this time next year.
And I want to remind the audience, none of us know what the price will do tomorrow, let alone months from now. This is all for fun. Of course, there's on-chain data and fundamental news. Clues. Thank you guys so much for joining us. My name's Austin of Altcoin Daily. We speak to an audience of over 3 million across all social platforms. I will leave it to these legends to give their final thoughts and then see us out on the floor.
Again, we got a huge opportunity ahead of us, an amazing history. Let's all go change the world and build a better financial system, not just for us, but our kids and grandkids. And like the song earlier, don't stop believing.
Good stuff. I think my first crypto conference was in 2013. I was setting up a booth for the company I had founded. The first person I met at that conference was an individual setting up his booth across from me for Why Bitcoin magazine. This was David Bailey. He was the first person I met at a crypto conference. And been to many of these over the years, and it's just incredible to see where we've come over the past decade plus. Frankly, while it was the aspiration to get to this place and to have this level of attention and adoption and spread the word on crypto, you know, it's probably exceeded my expectations, which is awesome. I think we have a lot more to go. At Kraken, our mission is exactly this. We are in this to grow crypto adoption with the goal being to increase financial freedom for everyone across the world. And so let's keep it rolling.
I just wanted to say thank you for everybody in the room, for all your energy, for all your commitment to Bitcoin, for all the work directly or indirectly that you do, because I'm sure if you're here, you're involved in the space, or at least working in it or interested. And also thank you for supporting Xapo Bank over these years. You know, we've been around a very long time. Building a bank that touches Bitcoin, I can assure you, is incredibly challenging. We've had our ups and downs, but you know, check it, give us a chance. We're here to serve you guys. So if you're a customer, thank you very much. If you're not a customer, please come and take a look. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, same message. I think thank you for everyone that in this space for so long now. You know, it's thanks to everyone believing in Bitcoin that now we are in this world where Bitcoin is a strategic reserve at the US government. It's part of treasury for like many 500 companies. You know, it's such a journey. So very excited to be part of it and very excited to see where we're going.
Thank you, guys. Round of applause for these legends.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for an incredible.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine that's presented by Mara. I'm Frank Corver, the political correspondent here at Bitcoin Magazine, and I'm joined by none other than Paula Penley, lawyer at Nelson Mullins, who represents Bitcoin miners. Very important work. Paula, please tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a trial attorney by trade, and I represent Bitcoin miners, publicly traded miners like Mara, and litigation that they face, any kind of contract disputes, any kind of environment.
Break here at the Bitcoin miner when Mara was talking. Pretty much probably just a commercial for Mara. Been a lot of interesting information so far. So let me know what you guys think about this Bitcoin conference in Vegas 2025. A lot of interesting information. So it looks like we're finally shifting to pro crypto, what we've been after for some time. Shout out to Blood Moore. Interesting name. And who is this? Robert chimed in earlier. What up, Black Tiger Robert? And what up, Blood More? Not sure if you guys are able to see this discussion about Lightning Network. Let's see if I can get this beta to run. But as always, thanks for joining. And it's not over, just switching. Trying to keep the videos from getting too long. So I'm just going to switch back over. Let me know if you guys are enjoying it and if you guys can hear okay. If everything's going good, volume, there's no problems, let me know. Or if you have ran into any issues. I know sometimes the computer freezes up a bit, but I guess we'll switch on over real quick. Chime in. Now we're going to end this session and start part 3. But let me know in the comments real quick. If not now, forever hold your peace. But thanks for joining. Again, it's okay to be different. It's got to be weird. Why not you? And is it that you're weird or everyone else is? It's food for thought there. But we can see the Bitcoin adoption is coming rapidly, like we told you it would. But as always, let's get back to the money and stay dangerous. It's your main man BTM signing out on the BTM Crypto News Network. And look for the part 3 to pop up in about 2:45. And thanks for joining. I'm out.